I am Eleanor Hartley, 36 years old. I used to believe that if I stayed useful, quiet, and close, they would eventually remember I was still part of them. But then the trustee list came amended, printed, and signed without my name. No one called to explain. No one asked if I'd seen it. And I understood some absences aren't mistakes. They're arrangements. There's a difference between being forgotten and being left out on purpose. You can feel it in the pause after your name doesn't appear in the precision of an absence too clean to be an accident. The email came in while I was parked outside the pharmacy. I wasn't expecting anything important, just promotions, appointment reminders, the usual digital clutter. But then I saw the subject line, Easter brunch, final seating list plus table assignments, sent from Brooke's address. Not even Jake's! I opened the attachment. The chart was color-coded, organized by table, with cheerful column headers, confirmed guests' allergies, preferred beverages, Table 1. Mom, Dad, Jake Brooke, Aunt Ruth, Uncle Frank, Table 2, the cousins from Maine. Table 3, Brooke's sister, and someone named Kelsey Jake's sister-in-law. Tentative. Not me. The final line of the email read, "Please don't forward outside confirmed family members. We want to keep it intimate." I scrolled up once then, again. There was no mistake. Just omission. The car stayed quiet. The radio was off. I rested my hand on the gear shift, though I wasn't going anywhere. My phone lit up briefly, group text from Whitmore family. No mention, no explanation. I tapped open voicemail. Empty. No message from Mom. No follow-up from Jake. No accidental dial. Only the ordinary kind of silence that's too practiced to be casual. The keychain resting beside me had once been a graduation gift. Brass worn smooth the letters, H engraved on the back. I ran my thumb over the edges. It used to hang on the same ring as my apartment keys in Cambridge. It used to mean something. Now, it just made a sound when it bumped against the plastic console, faint, metallic, meaningless. Mom used to say family's not something you apply for. You're born into it. You stay. But that only works if someone's still keeping the door unlocked. Jake once told a friend. He thought I wasn't listening. Eleanor makes things uncomfortable. She always needs a reason. I didn't answer then. I don't now. I could have replied to Brooke. I could have asked, was it a mistake? But I knew it wasn't. Some things don't come with explanations, just attachments. And sometimes the only thing left to do is nothing. Blending in is harder when you're trying too hard not to take up space. I planned the entire anniversary party the year they reached 40. Booked the venue, arranged the flowers, printed place cards with gold script. Jake arrived late with Brooke on his arm and a bottle of wine wrapped in silver foil. At the end of the night, Dad raised his glass. To Jake for putting this all together. We're lucky to have someone who thinks of everything. I nodded. My name had never made it onto the toast. It didn't make it into the thank you card either. The envelope came weeks later, addressed in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. You made it all so lovely. Thank you for helping Jake shine. I never brought it up. I folded the card in half and placed it behind a book on my shelf. Not to keep. Just to lose, gently. That fall I flew in early for her birthday. Changed a work meeting, left my suitcase in the rental car. When I arrived, the kitchen lights were off. Balloons already wilted. "Oh," she said, at the door. "We thought you'd changed your mind. There was still cake in the fridge, but the plates had been cleared." I left the gift on the table and stood in the driveway a little longer than I needed to. She waved through the blinds, but didn't open them all the way. There was a conversation about the trust fund once. I asked whether we could include Emily and the twins in the next distribution round. Honey Mom rested a spoon against the rim of her teacup. Not, everything needs to be fair. The way she said it didn't leave room for further thought, just the sound of ceramic against porcelain. I stopped asking for clarity after that. At dinners, I learned to excuse myself early. At weddings, I stood just outside the group photo. You always make things harder than they are, Aunt Ruth told me once in the hallway, adjusting her bracelet without looking up. I used to believe that if I kept all quiet long enough, someone would notice the silence, that they'd remember I was there. But maybe some rooms aren't built for every voice, and maybe I mistook endurance for invitation. There are memories that don't announce themselves. They just settle in like dust behind furniture, quiet, undisturbed, unnoticed by everyone but you. The certificate came folded in a blue folder. Academic Excellence Senior Year. I held it in my lap the whole ride home, waiting for the right moment. At the dinner table, Dad was already checking his watch before the potatoes were passed. Next time, don't make them hold the program so long. I was stuck behind a tractor the whole way back. The folder stayed under my chair. I didn't open it again. In my second year at Harvard Law, I received a nomination to serve on the Student Advisory Council. I printed the email, slid it into the envelope with a note. Mom called a week later, not about the letter. Jake says he's thinking about applying to Stanford. Did you know you should talk to him? He's unsure about his chances. I offered to review his personal statement. She told me not to overwhelm him. There's a painting I made the year I moved to DC, a winter scene, thick brush strokes alight in the window of a snow-covered house. I wrapped it in brown paper and brought it home for Christmas. No one said anything when I unboxed it. Let's wait to hang it until we find the right spot, Dad murmured, placing it behind the liquor cabinet. The paper stayed wrapped around the bottom half, torn just enough to reveal the corner of the frame. It's still there, I think. The wood's probably warped by now. At Jake's graduation, I stood 3 rows behind the family. The camera shutter clicked 3 times. In the framed photo above the fireplace, you can just see my shoulder at the edge, half covered by someone's coat. Mom once remarked while clearing dishes, "You never quite look comfortable in pictures." Maybe that's why you always stand off to the side. I didn't remind her she was the one who placed me there. They never said I didn't belong. They just spoke around me like a guest no one introduced. And I learned not to raise my hand for what wouldn't be remembered. Some erasures don't need ink, just absence. Repeated enough times it fills its own space. Names disappear in silence long before they vanish on paper. I was scrolling without looking for anything when Aunt Ruth's message appeared. Group chat, buried beneath recipes and forwarded prayers. Brooke says Jake's sister will be joining after all, glad she could make it this year. No one corrected her. No one clarified which sister. I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim, then opened the state's charity registry. The foundation still carried the family name, Whitmore Family Educational Fund. Dad started it after his retirement. I helped draft the original bylaws. He made me do the legal language twice to make it sound less eager. I typed slowly, expecting to see the same list I'd memorized years ago. Trustees: Richard Whitmore, Jacob Whitmore, Brooke Daniels. That was all. Beneath the names, amended trustee filing, February 12th. A single line, no explanation. I printed it. Laser ink on 20-dotted paper, folded once too neatly. Slipped it into the beige folder where I kept stray forms, old bank stubs, a thank you card from someone at a legal non-profit I once reviewed documents for. I placed the file back in the drawer top right corner. I didn't want to see it again. I just didn't to forget it was real. Mom texted later without preamble. It's just paperwork, sweetheart. You were never really involved in that kind of thing. I read it 3 times. The word never sat differently. It didn't mean you weren't added. It meant you were never in. The cardigan was gone too. The soft one with the frayed cuff I left in the hall closet 2 winters ago. Oh, Emily took it, Mom had said when I asked. You left it behind. I thought you didn't want it. I pictured her holding it up, deciding it no longer belonged to me. Giving it away must have felt generous. Dad was reading on the porch once when I mentioned applying to law school board positions. He didn't look up. Legacies earned by consistency, not visits, he said, tapping the ash off his cigar. That was the only response. I left the amended record on the desk for hours. I didn't highlight, annotate, or circle my missing name. I just let it sit there. Cold, legal, precise. Not a door slammed, not a cut. Just the quiet, official removal of a name that no longer served the image. And I understood. I wasn't overlooked. I was replaced. Walking away doesn't always feel like movement. Sometimes it's just the stillness that follows a final decision. I waited until mid-morning when Mom usually brewed her second cup of tea. The dial tone was steady, familiar. If this is about Easter, she began, even before I spoke. We've already filled the seats. Brooks, printing menus, so it's a bit late to reshuffle. I counted one breath before answering. I won't be joining. Not for Easter. Not for anything else. Please don't save a seat. She hesitated not long enough to be surprised. Well, if that's what you feel is best. No apology. No invitation to reconsider. Just the quiet click of a mother excusing herself from a conversation she never meant to finish. I scrolled through the family group chat messages about egg dye colors, place settings, who would bring sparkling cider. Jake had shared a playlist link. Brooke responded with clapping emojis. I held my thumb on the thread, tapped delete, and didn't hesitate. In my email inbox, I searched for Whitmore News. Unsubscribed. I boxed up the apartment in slow motions. Every object had its own pause. The linen napkins Mom gave me when I got my first promotion, I wrapped them in old newspaper. The ceramic pie dish I brought to Thanksgiving 4 years ago, never used, still labeled Eleanor in black marker. I slipped it inside a canvas bag and tucked it under the kitchen sink for the next tenant. I didn't take it with me. I placed the cardigan on a padded hanger and left it hanging in the closet, buttoned all the way to the top. It smelled faintly of cedar, but it didn't hold the shape of me anymore. The keychain came off last. I opened the narrow drawer beside the bed, slid it between 2 receipts and a safety pin. It made no sound when it landed. Dad had once muttered in passing, people who need to announce their absence are just hoping someone will chase them. I never brought it up again. The new address was already signed, already scanned. 1 bedroom, 1 chair by the window, no questions. I didn't send a message to explain. Didn't check if anyone noticed the silence. Some distances are clearest when no one tries to close them. And some closures don't slam shut. They simply stop echoing. Silence, when chosen, sounds nothing like abandonment. The cabin was smaller than I expected. 1 key, 1 lock. The man who handed it to me had wrapped it in a paper towel as if it was something delicate. The windows had no curtains. The floor creaked with every step. The fireplace had a soot stain shaped like a thumbprint. There was only 1 chair, not because of minimalism, but because the man who lived here before had simply stopped needing to. I unpacked slowly. 1 drawer for folded sweaters, 1 shelf for the mugs I kept. I boiled water in a dented kettle I bought from a woman who sold books and antiques under the same tarp. "Doesn't whistle anymore," she warned. That suited me. I cooked without recipes, washed each dish by hand and let them dry face down. I kept the lights low not out of gloom, but because the sun did most of the work. I opened the windows even when it was cold. The air here didn't ask for permission. In the mornings I sat on the wooden chair facing the lake. No cushion. The grooves pressed into my legs if I sat too long, so I learned to shift my weight every 10 minutes. Jake once joked Eleanor could make a monastery look loud. He meant it as charm, I think. The typewriter came from a woman named Evelyn, who ran a stall at the weekend market. The ribbon was dry, the keys sticky. "It still works, just needs reminding," she told me. I didn't test it until days later. I rolled in a blank sheet, pressed one key T. It printed slightly tilted like it was leaning into something it no longer trusted. I didn't mind. Each afternoon I typed fragments, not stories, just moments, sentences that no longer had a home in conversation. She looked at me like I was a draft that needed revising. The cake was already cut when I arrived. No one asked what I wanted, only what I brought. I didn't reread them. I folded the pages and slid them into a box beside the chair. The chair never moved. Mom used to say you need to stop thinking so much. People can feel it, and it wears them out. But here, no one needed to feel anything for me to exist. And I finally understood presence doesn't require permission. Just space. Need doesn't always sound like wanting someone back. Sometimes it just sounds like wanting someone available. Jake's email came in late, time-stamped, 11:47 p.m. "Hey, I know things have been weird, but Mom wants everyone in the holiday photo. She says it won't feel complete without you." The line about things being weird was vague enough to avoid saying what had happened. The line about the photo was exact enough to remind me what hadn't. The next morning, I saw I'd been added back into the family thread. Whitmore family. Holiday planning. The first message read, "Reminder, please confirm RSVPs by Friday. We're doing tartan again this year." Formal. My name was listed beneath pending. Brooke had added a heart. There was also a missed call from Mom. No voicemail. Just the number sitting there, unreturned. Later that week, Uncle Frank emailed from his personal address. The subject line, "Quick favor heard from someone at the bar. You might be DOJ." If so, Jake could really use some insight on a grant review panel he's pitching to. Could we hop on a call? No mention of how I was, no acknowledgement of the last 6 months. I moved the message to a new folder, Evidence of Return. It sat alongside Jake's email and the group chat re-entry notification. I didn't delete them. I didn't answer. The framed photo from last year had once hung in the hallway of my parents' house, 6 people smiling in front of the fireplace. I'd been in the original standing just behind Aunt Ruth. But when I visited in January, the version on display had been cropped. "We tightened the frame," Mom explained, adjusting it on the wall. The wider one looked cluttered. Now they wanted me back inside the edges. I opened the box where I kept loose photos and found an older one, maybe from 5 years ago. I was holding a tray of deviled eggs, caught mid-laugh, blurred just enough to suggest motion. Someone had once called it their favorite shot of me before it stopped being framed. I slid it back in, closed the lid, and returned it to the shelf. I didn't shred it. I didn't linger. Some invitations don't come from memory. They come from vacancy. And I had learned not to confuse the two. There's a rhythm to living quietly that doesn't ask to be understood. I wake before the light finishes settling. The kettle hums, but no longer whistles. I water the rosemary wipe the counter and skim headlines, slowly reading only what fits on the screen before I scroll. I don't save articles anymore. I don't flag anything for later. The desk is mine now. I didn't earn it. I chose it. A plain surface with a small drawer that sticks on the left side. The typewriter sits in the center ribbon, faded return bar, still crooked from the market. Beside it, a stack of legal transcripts to review, and next to that, a photo one I took myself. I'm sitting on the porch barefoot, holding a pencil, with no paper in sight. There's no one else in the frame. Mrs. Adler stops by sometimes. She brings used books wrapped in string and blends her own tea. You read with your shoulders, upright, intentional, like everything is being graded. I never correct her. She stirs the leaves gently, as if taste depends more on grace than precision. Her chamomile lingers longer than expected mild at first, then steady. I've started keeping a jar of it near the sink. I don't check my phone after dinner anymore. The need to scan for missed calls has loosened like a habit, outgrowing its usefulness. Jake sent a video last week, Whitmore Family Montage 2023. There was a message beneath it. Wish you'd been there. I didn't open the file. I moved it to a folder labeled Archived. Not out of anger, just clarity. Dad once leaned back during a family brunch and tapped the rim of his glass. You can always tell who doesn't belong by how still they sit. I remember tracing the edge of my cloth napkin for the rest of that meal, folding it precisely twice without speaking. The watch I bought at the flea market doesn't tick. The seller offered to fix it, but I declined. I keep it on the windowsill. The sun hits it at 9:10 every morning. That's how I know the day has begun. I don't wait to be invited anymore. I walk. I notice. I stay. And for the first time, I trust the version of myself that no one else is asking about. Some doors don't creak or resist. They just stop being used. I placed the envelope on the table, weighed it down with the bottom of a coffee mug, and looked at it as if it might speak. Inside was the notarized form, an official withdrawal from the Whitmore Family Trust, signed and dated. Beside it, a card for clarity, for closure. I didn't sign that one. The post office clerk didn't ask questions. I paid for tracking declined insurance and kept the receipt folded in my pocket until I reached home. I didn't check it again. My inbox held a single new message by nightfall. Confirming request. Kindly reply if submitted in error. I clicked, once moved it to a folder labeled Complete, then shut the laptop without waiting for the sound. The frame on my shelf still held the lake photo from childhood, the one where everyone's half laughing turned slightly away. I took it out slowly, the glass cool against my fingers. The paper had curled at the edges. I didn't tear it. I placed it face down in the drawer beneath the stove manuals and tax forms. I replaced it with an image I hadn't looked at in years. Me in the back corner of the university library, holding a highlighter in mid-air. No one else in the frame, just shelves and light. Mom once paused mid-cleaning and glanced at that photo when she first saw it. You always looked more yourself when no one else was around. Maybe that's why we didn't know what to do with you. She didn't mean it cruelly, but she didn't say it kindly either. I updated my email account. Removed Whitmore from the username, deleted the auto-signature that listed a degree no one in the family ever acknowledged. I picked a new password that had nothing to do with birthdays or maiden names. Then the typewriter. I wiped the dust from its edge rolled in fresh paper and let the keys settle beneath my fingers. No introduction. No title. Family is not the place you're given. It's the space you reclaim. No need to backspace. No need to read it twice. Dad once tapped his glass during a dinner toast. Real closure is a myth. People just get tired of holding the door open. I didn't correct him. I just stopped standing in the doorway. Quiet feels different when it's not hiding anything. The steam curled slowly above the rim of the mug. I didn't reach for it right away. The window pane held a soft layer of frost, not enough to blur the trees, just enough to remind me they were still standing. The notebook lay open beside the cup. The leather had darkened at the corners from use. On the first page, I'd written a sentence weeks ago, without date or header. This isn't a diary. It's a place where I don't need to explain myself. I hadn't added more since then. The walk to the lake followed no particular path. The snow had packed firm beneath my boots, and I didn't try to avoid the ice. The scarf around my neck was uneven, one side longer than the other. I'd meant to fix that when I finished knitting it, but then I didn't. Mrs. Adler waited near the trail bend, holding a basket covered with linen. She handed it over with a nod. Still cold. I tucked the cloth into my coat pocket, but clearer than ever. She didn't reply, just walked the opposite direction without looking back. At home, I laid the basket on the counter untouched. I dusted the windowsill with my sleeve, moved the second cup of tea closer to the light. No one was expected, but I poured it anyway. The box beneath the bed still held the old letters, holiday cards, clipped recipes, a postcard from Jake sent during his semester abroad. I didn't read them. I folded each one in half, wrapped them in brown paper, and slid them into the lowest drawer. The photo I took last fall, standing between two birches, coat unzipped leaves mid-turn, sat, unframed on the desk. I leaned it against the typewriter. No inscription. No one else in the image. The machine hadn't moved since last week. The ribbon was still stretched, paper half-fed, waiting. I placed my fingers gently on the keys, but didn't press down. Mom once told me, "You've always been hard to hold on to, like you were built for elsewhere." She meant it as a warning. I never asked to be held. I only wanted to stop apologizing for existing where I stood. Some stories don't need to be retold. They just need to be lived. And I don't need proof of arrival. I only need the stillness to mean I stayed.